And now, marine weather around Alaska.
I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan, and here is your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook for this Saturday, August 10th, 2024. And starting with the sea ice, the ice continues to melt off here along the Beaufort Sea. Temperatures are not nearly as warm as what they were early in the week. If you recall, had record high temperatures. Dead Horse hit an all-time record high of 89 degrees on Tuesday. And since then, temperatures have cooled back down into the 40s to some 50s, but not going to be nearly that hot again. And we have plenty of open water along the Chukchi Sea coastline from Wainwright all the way south to the Bering Strait, though there is some ice there in eastern Russia. We are expecting a cold front to push across. It's not a strong front, but one will be pushing across eastern Russia, the Bering Strait, Monday into Tuesday, bringing a little cooler weather in the wake of that. In the meantime, though, this low is going to come on shore. It's currently crossing through Kuskokwim Bay into the southwest interior by early Sunday morning with a front pushing in across the Gulf. And this has some strong gusty winds. We expect high winds along areas of the Alaska Range, Anchorage, Eastern Hillside, and Turnagain Arm. Some wind gusts could be on the order of 55 to as high as 75 miles an hour in some of the higher elevations. Heavier rainfall, another 1 to 2 inches of rain up through the Susitna Valley and 1 to 3 inches along coastal areas of the eastern Kenai and around Prince William Sound. So we have flood watches and flood warnings in effect. And then as we get into Sunday, that rain also tries to push into the northern panhandle with this frontal system. Precipitation should begin to let up at least across Cook Inlet and the upper portion of the Alaska Peninsula as we go through Sunday afternoon, early evening. There is yet a secondary disturbance that comes across that could keep the rain going over south central well into Sunday evening and night, and even early Monday. We still expect some moisture to kind of just linger across the Alaska Range in areas of south central before things dry out on Tuesday into Wednesday. And we have this cold front, not a strong one, that'll be kind of pushing eastward across areas of the north Monday into Tuesday. So marine forecast for the Panhandle, we're expecting Sunday winds to be southerly 20 knots, 3-4 foot waves there within Lynn Canal. Northwest winds 15 knots, Stevens Passage, Dixon Entrance with waves there 2-3 feet. Areas south of Sitka, northwest to west winds 20 knots, swell 6 to 7 feet, but then south winds turning more easterly at 25 knots, increasing to 40 knot easterly gales at Cape Suckling with waves out that way in the northeastern portion of the Gulf Coast, 10 to 14 feet. And then on Monday, southeast to south winds 15 knots across the inner channels, waves running 2-3 feet. For the outer coast, generally westerly winds to 15 knots south of Yakutat, with swells around 7 feet, and then kind of a mix of winds either southwesterly in or out easterly there, Cape Suckling at 10 to 15 knots. So Sunday, we'll still see some gale force winds to 40 knots here near Kayak Island outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance. And then within Prince William Sound, southeast winds to 30 knots. Southwest winds off the Kenai coast at 25 knots. Westerly winds to 30 knots. There across lower Cook Inlet with swells up to 10 feet. Kind of variable winds because we're going to have a front that's slowly working its way northeastward across the Kenai Peninsula during the day, Sunday morning into the afternoon hours. In the wake of that system, winds are going to turn more west or southwesterly. 10-knot west winds there within Prince William Sound Monday with 2-foot waves. Southwest winds 15 to 20 knots off to 25 knots off of Anchor Point. Westerly, though, at the entrance of Cook Inlet to 25 knots. Swells across the lower Cook Inlet 5 to 7 feet. Now across Kodiak Island and much of the Alaska Peninsula, westerly winds Sunday to 30 knots. 8-foot waves within Shelikof Strait, 6 to 9 foot swells down along the nearshore waters on the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula. And then on the north side, swells of 8 to as high as 11 feet there in the wider expanse of Bristol Bay. And then for Monday, generally west winds 20-25 knots on the North Pacific side, swells 4-5 feet, but 25 knot west-southwest winds along the north side of the Alaska Peninsula, the Bering side, with swells of 7 to 8 feet. For the Aleutian Islands on Sunday, Look for west-northwest winds 15 to 20 knots, eastern Aleutians. Once we get toward the central Aleutians, Atka, Adak, especially up north of Kiska and Shemya, variable winds at 10 knots. And then on Monday, we still have west winds on the order of 15 to 20 knots, eastern Aleutians around Dutch Harbor. Variable winds 10 knots, Nikolsky back toward north of Atka through Adak, and more east-southeast winds on the North Pacific side of the chain, central and western Aleutians with swells 4 or 5 feet. Across the southwest coast on Sunday, in the wake of that first low coming into the southwest interior, we have a secondary disturbance that's going to swing through this area. So with that, we still are going to have some brisk west-southwest winds 25 to 30 knots across the region, swells 7 to 8 feet within Kuskokwim and Bristol Bays, 9 to as high as 11 feet from St. Paul up to St. Matthew, and along the lower Yukon coast and through the wider part here of Norton Sound, we could see swells of 4 to 5 feet. And then on Monday, winds will come down a bit. West winds to 25 knots here into Kuskokwim and Bristol Bay, swells 7 feet. West-southwest winds 20 to 25 knots. Pribilov's up to St. Matthew, 8 to 9 foot swells. A little more of a mixed bag. Northeast winds within Norton Sound 10 knots with 2 foot waves, and then west-northwest winds 15 to 20 knots along the lower Yukon coastline. And for areas south of the Bering Strait, south winds 15 to as high as 25 knots on the north side of St. Lawrence Island. Generally, south winds 10 to 15 knots through the lower Chukchi Sea before they turn northeasterly 15 to 20 knots from Utqiagvik eastward to Kaktovik along the Arctic coast. And for Monday, winds, bit of a mixed bag up here along the Arctic coast, westerly at Kaktovik, southeasterly 10 knots, Prudhoe Bay, but westerly at Utqiagvik. And as we drop down into the lower Chukchi Sea, look for south winds, generally 10 to 15 knots low. They could be as high as 25 knots from the south there off of Point Hope and Cape Lisburne. And then on the south side of the Bering Strait, look for west winds to 10 knots along the west side of the Seward Peninsula and northwest winds to 15 knots on the north side of St. Lawrence Island.